Welcome back to Spellbound. I'm BJ and this is a recent reads wrap-up. So I've been reading a ton of epic summer reads and I really want to talk about them. The Mermaid, the Witch in the Sea by Maggie Tokuda-Hall. Despite the title, this book is actually about pirates. This book is about Florian, sometimes Flora, who has made a life for them out at sea and is always looking out for their older brother, who's like a drunken pirate and always gambling away their pitiful savings. And it's about Evelyn, a highborn imperial lady who's basically just been sold into wedlock and is being shipped out to her husband, casket on board. Well, unbeknownst to her, Evelyn ends up on Florian's ship, and once they're far enough out to sea, the crew reveal their true colors and intentions. This is actually a slaver ship, intent on starting a war with the imperial mainland by enslaving all of the highborn nobles. While on board, Evelyn and Florian get to know each other and end up part of a very large political conspiracy. The plot of this one is incredible and far-reaching, which is why I'm glad that there is a sequel. But it is the threading of all of these elements that make this book really incredible and so intense. There is a lot of commentary on identity and the role that misogyny and the patriarchy play in identity politics, and there are some really, really cool, epic, non-binary characters in this book. There's also a lot of commentary on colonialism, as this is a fantasy world, but it is inspired by Imperial Japan. Most importantly, this book has beautiful prose and an elevated air that it does put a distance between us and the characters, we're not always up in their heads, and it does read differently than we might be used to with that sort of very fast-paced, surface-level contemporary YA style of writing. It doesn't read like that. It does read like an older novel, but please don't let that stop you because this book is so beautiful and so good, and I rated it 5 stars. Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. I know. Yes, I read Fourth Wing, and I loved it. Before you judge me, as I said in my mid-year book freakout tag, I do not think that this book was super well written. It is not the best book that I have read this year, but it is definitely one that I had so much fun reading. For those of you who don't know, and if you don't how, this book is about the Dragon Riders Quadrant at a military college during their first year of training. Our protagonist is Violet, who is chronically ill with a condition that leaves her with frail bones and tissue, which put her highly at risk of imminent death at this very violent and dangerous murder college. Due to a past political conspiracy, there's also a small medium-sized group of other participants at this Dragon Riders College, and one in particular who want Violet's head on a spike. This book is predictable but enjoyable, violent but palatable, and very surface-level writing, and therefore easily bingeable. I never read dystopian YA, but a lot of people have compared this book to Divergent, at least in premise. But to me, this book felt a lot like reading Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire for the first time, 3 years ago, because this whole book is about the students going through training and then getting bonded to dragons in order to complete their first year here as recruits. And it is understood that the majority of students actually won't make it and they will perish in the effort. The best part about this book, in my opinion, are the dragons. So in this book, the dragons are actually characters, and they can communicate with humans through their human-dragon bond. So there is dialogue in a way, and there is banter, and the dragons have personalities and actual characters, and that adds just such a richness to this plot that, I don't know, can only be described as fun. This book is fun. This is a fun, epic summer fantasy adventure, and I'm really glad that I read it. But my disclaimer is that every single criticism against it is entirely valid. On the more emotional side of things, I read One Italian Summer by Rebecca Serle. I actually got an arc of this book because it reminded me of my own mom and her relationship with her mom. This book follows 30-year-old Katie as she's grieving the loss of her mother and best friend. Her whole life, her mother, Carol, has been talking about taking a girls' trip to the Amalfi Coast so that she can show Katie how pivotal and important this small Italian community was to her during her younger years before she had a family. But Carol passed before they could take the trip. So Katie takes the trip alone, and while she's there, she actually encounters a 30-year-old Carol in the lobby of her hotel. and the two end up taking this trip kind of together, and it is following Katie with her mother Carol as she's experiencing the Amalfi Coast and this pivotal trip for the first time. And it's beautiful, and this new relationship that Katie forms with her mother Carol shows a different side of her, and it really heals her grieving heart until she discovers some hidden truths that Carol never shared with her before. This book is beautiful and romantic, and the whole book feels like it's been painted with this like warm, golden, late afternoon summer glow. And the plot is sweet and emotional and paints this mother-daughter relationship in a really unique way, and I really enjoyed it. My mom, though, loved it. She said that it was a beautiful story, and she was really sad when it was over because she enjoyed reading it so much. And we both rated it 5 stars. Skin of the Sea by Natasha Bowen. Drawing from diverse African mythology, Bowen tells the story of Simi, a mamiwata who's been charged with ferrying the souls of those who die at sea, specifically those who have been stolen from their homeland and sold into slavery, because this book takes place right at the beginning of the transatlantic slave trade on the western coast of Africa. One day, Simi approaches a young boy who's just been tossed overboard, only to discover that he's still alive. So, not willing to let another life be lost, she saves this boy, thereby breaking her oath as a mamiwata, and she angers the gods. So this launches Simi on a quest to first take the boy home and return him to his homeland, but also to find a long-hidden mythical object that will allow her to petition the Supreme Creator on behalf of all mamiwata who are now at risk because of her mistake. But there's a corrupt, power-hungry god also on the hunt for this mythical object, and he will stop at nothing to find it. This book was a haunting and beautiful read that was absolutely packed with mythology and folklore, and some of the characters and elements of this book were so unique, at least to me, that I was really glad that Bowen included at the end of the book this like further reading and works cited almost list, so that you could really see how well the history and mythology worked together to tell this story. It was a 5-star read start to finish, and I immediately bought the sequel. My Best Friend's Exorcism by Grady Hendrix. I loved this book. I read it all in one sitting. This book follows Abby, who has been best friends with Gretchen since they were like 10. And now at 16, Abby is forced to watch Gretchen as she sort of descends into a full-on demonic possession after an LSD trip in the woods. This is a campy horror novel that has some seriously developed undertones of religious trauma and sexual assault and how those can manifest in human behavior. For as heavy as the undertones, it is equally campy and stylized on the surface. This book takes place in the 80s and is well saturated with pop culture references that help keep the tone and the attention sort of floating along the surface. And then when it does dip below to sort of touch on those heavier themes, it does so with a very absurdist humor style that really keeps the focus and tone and vibe of the book light, while still knowing that there's heavier stuff within it. Through all of this, it is still a horror novel. So there are some very gruesome parts and some suspense and some creepy elements. But the most terrifying parts of this novel are the most normal situations and circumstances that those who did grow up in religious purity culture had to experience. This book is so good, and it is a whole vibe, and I rated it 5 stars. Cursed Princess Club Volume 2 by Lambcat. Holy cow, I loved this book. I loved this book. This graphic novel follows Gwen, who is the youngest of the princesses of the Pastel Kingdom. And in book 1, their father betroths all of them to the princes of the Plaid Kingdom. And everything was going fine until Gwen overhears her betrothed call her ugly. In this book, Gwen starts attending the Cursed Princess Club, which is a secret club of princesses who have various and hilarious curses inflicted upon them. The club teaches her what it's like to be beautiful on the inside through a fun series of outings and lessons. My favorite part of this book is when they take her to visit some princels, who are basically like royal incels. And the lesson here, the lesson of the outing is to serve as a warning, to show what happens when really crushing insecurity that isn't processed or dealt with can manifest into really toxic behaviors that are projected outward onto others. And I laughed my head off through this whole chapter. Honestly, this whole book made me laugh out loud. This whole book is funny. The humor is absolutely on point. The illustrations are colorful and bright and beautiful. I've already reread it. I love this book. If you like graphic novels, if you like laughing, you should pick it up too. I rated this book 5 stars, obviously. So that's it for today. This was just a quick wrap of 6 recent reads that I've been enjoying, and fortunately for me, they have all been quality books. Like, I have been on a really great run of some really quality 4 and 5 star reads, and I'm enjoying it. So let me know what you've been reading, or if you've read any of the books that I mentioned in this video. I would love to hear from you. And then if you liked this video, give it a thumbs up, and if you loved it, hit subscribe. And of course, there's always Instagram. Take care, and as always, happy reading.